Hello, Blazer fans, Blazers Edge readers. Welcome to our first player breakdown here on BlazersEdge.com. I'm Sam Tung here with Dave Deckard. We're going to, over the course of the summer, be breaking down or doing a player-by-player breakdown of a number of different things for each of these players, including their yearly improvement from last year to this season. And additionally, we're going to be doing some comparison between each player and a couple other players that are at their salary level to see what type of bang for the Blazers buck they're getting with that specific player. So today, our first player breakdown, as I said, and Dave, an opportunity to talk about Wesley Matthews. So before we delve into the stats, and we're going to be able to post a lot of these stats up here, and you'll see those in a second, but before we delve into that, Dave, just give us the 30-second recap. At the end of the year, what were your feelings about Wesley Matthews? What did you take away from this season from Wes? And where did you see maybe some of his strengths and weaknesses? Just kind of sum up the type of season that Matthews had.
Well, we got about what was expected from Matthews. He is not the sexiest banana in the bunch, so to speak, but he is exactly what the Blazers need in this system, in that he can shoot three-pointers, he can defend, he can score without dominating the ball, and he doesn't turn over the ball a lot or really hurt you in a lot of ways. He's not going to change the course of a game for you usually, but he will keep you in the game and always provide an outlet when your starters or other flashier players are getting stymied. Now, the weaknesses are the ones he's had all along. As he said, he's not going to take over a game. And when he does try, the results can be mixed. He obviously doesn't score really well off the dribble. He did develop a little bit of a post-up game this year, which was fine, but not going to be the team's bread and butter. So he's not got a lot of wrinkles or permutations that you're not seeing already. However, what he does give you is darn good, and again, for the Blazers, it's like being married to someone for a while. Do they look as cute as they did when they were 21? No, but they fit you, right? And they're the right person for you. That's kind of the way Matthews is with this Blazer lineup.
Well, let's look at a couple of these statistics here, Dave. And what we're going to do here first, as I had mentioned just a little bit ago, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at some of the improvement from the 2012-2013 year, so just a couple years ago, to the most recent season for Wesley Matthews and see what that year-over-year improvement was. So Dave, I selected just a couple stats that I really wanted to highlight here in this video, and the first one was in the first year of comparison, Wesley shot 43.6% from the field, which really isn't all that high of a percentage. However, he did shoot nearly 40% from three-point range, just a hair under 40%, which, as we both know, once you hit that 40% mark, really becomes a valuable shot for Wes Matthews. And then a couple other stats to take a look at here. Average just under 3 free throws a game and 15 points per game. And now we're going to switch over to this most recent season, Dave, to see maybe where some of this improvement came, and there's a couple places that it's pretty staggering. The first one, he did up his field goal percentage to just over 44%, so a little bit of a bump. However, he was able to sustain really that 39-40% three-point percentage, which for a guy that was shooting such a high percentage, for him to sustain that, definitely a great thing for him. And then the last couple stats here, Dave, he bumped his free throw attempts per game average up over 1 free throw a game to nearly 4 a game, and additionally was scoring 17 points per game. That is a career high for Wes Matthews. So Dave, we talk a lot, at least during the season, and especially in those playoffs in that first round where Wes was kind of the defensive stopper against James Harden, and I think there's always been this talk about how Matthews has been one of the better defenders for the Trailblazers, especially as a physical guard. But in re-looking at some of these statistics, and I picked out obviously some of all of the stats that he has, but the reason for that was to really highlight not only is he a pretty solid defender, but we're seeing some improvement in the offensive game, and the places where he was very good, like the 3-point range, he really was able to sustain that, and I think there's a lot of value to be had there.
Yeah, he's comfortable in his own skin much more than he was a couple years ago. And you can see it not only in his on-court play and his statistics, but how he's leading the team, and he's kind of that go-getter on the squad. He's obviously found his place in the league and is producing with reliability, which is really what you can ask, especially of a shooting guard in this league. Nowadays, there aren't a ton of them. I mean, the days of Clyde Drexler and Mitch Richmond are gone. And you have, basically at shooting guard, you have kind of a potpourri of different abilities, a lot of which revolve around the ones that Matthews does well. 3-point shooting, defense. He adds custodianship of the ball. That's pretty good. 4 free throws is not bad for a guy who's mostly a jump shooter. The 44% clip from the field overall is actually pretty good for a backcourt player who is primarily a jump shooter too. Nothing to sneeze at there. Of course, his bread and butter is that 3-point shot. That's his most valuable asset that makes him fit in with the Blazers system. And frankly, again, as we've said with Robin Lopez and a few other players, Matthews needs to credit Coach Stotts for devising this system to take advantage of what he does well and not putting demands on him that he can't meet, so that anything he does do extra, like the occasional 20-point game or some scores from the post or what have you, is a bonus. So he's basically at a level where he's pretty good all the time, and then the nights where he's great, you go, wow, that's fantastic, instead of lamenting what he can't give. And that's not easy to do. There are a lot of teams where I think Matthews' weaknesses would be more exposed, either because they need more or because the system doesn't provide for him as well. But in Portland, as we said, he's just a good fit, and that's almost the end of the story.
Outside of the statistics, Dave, let's take a look to part of what we want to do here on the player breakdowns is do the bang for the Blazers buck. And really what we mean by this is we're going to be comparing this Trailblazer with a couple other players that are making a similar salary to what that player is making, to see what type of value the Trailblazer are getting. We're also going to compare a couple of key statistics here. So first, obviously, the first player is Wesley Matthews, averaging 3.5 rebounds a game, has that offensive rating of 118, as we mentioned before, and also only averaging 1.4 turnovers per 36 minutes. You had talked about that right at the beginning, Dave, how Wes Matthews turned the ball over very little for his position, and that's on a salary of just under $7 million, $6.9 million. So that is player A, and let's go to player B here, Dave. We're going to keep these a little under the radar so no one knows who they are. So player B is getting 5 rebounds per game, has a pretty low offensive rating at 97, and is averaging double the turnovers per 36 minutes at 2.8, and they are making $6.7 million. And player C is making as 3.4 rebounds a game. They have an offensive rating of 110, and they're also averaging more turnovers per 36 minutes at 1.8 at a salary level of $6.5 million. So player B, Dave, is Evan Turner, the now was the key guy in Philadelphia, but really took a back seat after he got traded to Indiana, and really hasn't seen the court at all since that trade, especially in the playoffs. And player C, Dave, is Kevin Martin, the shooting guard in Minnesota, a guy that they signed here in this most recent offseason to a multi-year contract, making $6.5 million. Pretty interesting when you look at these numbers here, Dave. The overall offensive rating of Kevin Martin, a guy that was really kind of credited as an offensive player, when he went to Minnesota, those numbers really dropped. And the same, and Evan Turner is just a turnover machine. So talk a little bit about this comparison between Matthews, Turner, and Martin, 3 guys that are making fairly similar salary levels. I understand that they're at different points in their careers, but even still, a pretty interesting comparison between three shooting guards that are really kind of in this $6.5 to just under $7 million range.
Yeah, well, you have to give the other two a little leeway because, as you say, they did change teams. And I guess Evan Turner didn't just take a back seat. He was on that hump in the back of the station wagon facing backwards and fell out. And he's at a rest stop somewhere hoping someone will come and get him. It's interesting comparison salary-wise. Offensive rating kind of it's difficult to do head-to-head with them because it depends on how you do on your team as much as how you do across teams. That said, obviously Matthews is excelling in that category, fewer turnovers. I mean, what's not to like? The Blazers, I think, in almost every situation would prefer Matthews over those other two, even though the other two players aren't anything to sneeze at. The only permutation where I could think that you'd maybe prefer a Martin or a Turner over Matthews is specifically coming off the bench to generate some offense, generate some points, where you just throw them the ball and say, hey, you, go and get us points with the second unit because our second unit is flagging and wasting the starter's work. You couldn't really do that with Matthews. But, of course, the Blazers wouldn't put Matthews on the bench, so there you go. But other than that, very limited circumstance. I don't think there's any way that Portland would prefer either of those other two. The interesting comparison would be what would happen if you put Matthews, say, on Minnesota or Indiana. I think he would flourish there. I think he'd be a big help. I'm not sure he could save either team. But, you know, I think Matthews would fare better going the other way than either of those guys would fare coming to Portland.
Well, Dave, just to wrap this up, last 30 seconds here, seems like at his salary level, the fact that he doesn't necessarily hurt you a ton, and his improvement level, it seems like Wes Matthews at his salary, as well as, you know, kind of what his role is on the team, he really does seem like he fits that role quite well as an overall value, but also just on the court. You know, when you take the salaries away, the fact that he doesn't turn the ball over, he's efficient. I mean, he's not tremendously efficient, but he's improved his efficiency over the last season. It seems like he's an overall pretty good fit for what they're trying to do when you look at the stats. And then, you know, at the beginning when you were talking, we weren't even looking statistically, just kind of the eye test. It seems like they both seem to match up.
Yeah, pretty much. If that's our last 30 seconds, you just said it all. Sam Tung, ladies and gentlemen. Way to go. I mean, yeah, it's summarized well. The Blazers couldn't do better at shooting guard, I don't think, because A, Matthews fits, and B, what shooting guards are there in the league? I mean, it's just not a high-intensity position at this point in the league's development, and so you're happy that you got the one you got. And as long as the overall structure of the team stays consistent, I think Matthews will be a big part of that story going forward. The hang-up will be if the Blazers make moves to change that starting lineup, then Matthews is probably the odd man out. But other than that, look forward to Wesley Matthews doing what Matthews does, and that's a good thing for the Blazers.
Well, that's going to do it here for our first player breakdown of the off season. We're going to be coming at you with these periodically throughout the summer. We have a lot of ground to cover, so Dave and I are ready for the challenge. So keep it here on blazersedge.com for that. Also, send those emails, blazersub@gmail.com, the usual spot. We'll answer those once a week as well. And that's going to do it for us here. So for Dave Deckard, I'm Sam Tung. Again, thanks everyone for joining us here for this player breakdown video. We will see you all very soon here on the Blazers Edge videocast and on blazersedge.com.